For the last 6 months, the American people have been party to rising tensions between warring ideologies. The 2016 election season saw the climax of a Cold War between left and right. The country split right down the middle, with the campaigns of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump representing the battle between politics as usual and its staunch opponents. Many also suggested that the 2016 election was indicative of racial tensions in the United States, given the right's bombastic rhetoric concerning Muslims and Mexican immigrants. The election and inauguration of Donald Trump didn't do much in the way of easing these tensions either.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Donald John Trump.
In Washington in January, the Women's March outnumbered inauguration goers and shut down Pennsylvania Avenue. Trump supporters and protesters clashed in the streets at both the march and at the inauguration, setting the stage for what will no doubt be a divided America under a Trump administration. For many Americans who identify as liberal or conservative, it can be easy to blame the opposing side when looking for the causes of our divided state of affairs. Liberals blame conservatives for their obstructionism and opposition to Barack Obama, which they believe sowed the seeds for a Trump presidency. Conservatives blame liberals for what they see as the failures of the Obama administration, as well as a concerted effort during election season and during Trump's presidency to delegitimize the anti-establishment campaign. The role of social media has even further polarized left and right, with the barrier of cyberspace allowing for vicious sparring from both sides. Because of this division, many people on both sides of the aisle often find it hard to sympathize with those who hold opposing views. I find that people have a difficult time humanizing the worldviews of others they disagree with, which further perpetuates the polarity rampant in this nation. In an attempt to bring the estranged wings of American politics closer to a consensus, I'm analyzing my hometown of New Fairfield, Connecticut. New Fairfield straddles many lines in terms of social and political divisions. It has the atmosphere of a New England hamlet, but is simultaneously heavily influenced by its proximity to New York. The wealth gap, while not apparent at first glance, is vast. Politically, New Fairfield represents the extremes of the spectrum. During the primaries, my town was one of 5 in the county to caucus for Bernie Sanders, with 52% of the vote. And in the general election, New Fairfield's vote went to Donald Trump with 56% of the vote. What's the catalyst for such stark contrasts? How are these divisions similar to the ones we see on a national scale? I went back to New Fairfield to find out. I spent some time looking for people to talk to. I wanted to find a range of political opinion. I couldn't just speak to conservatives or liberals exclusively. Thankfully, my town is small enough that a simple Facebook blast put me in touch with some good sources. I first went to speak to Cheryl Reedy, a longtime New Fairfield resident and former first selectman.
I moved here in 1983, so quite a long time. Almost 40 years.
So, and how do you feel about living in New Fairfield?
I love living in New Fairfield. Yeah, I do. There's a reason that I never left once I got here.
Yeah. She describes herself as a moderate liberal and says that some of her friends think of her as conservative compared to their progressive beliefs.
You know, it depends on who's labeling you. I call myself a moderate Democrat. Some people call me a conservative Democrat. I like to think that I'm kind of middle of the road. Obviously, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. That was one of those things to me. It was kind of like Bernie Sanders getting elected. I thought it was so improbable. I didn't pay a lot of attention until it was almost too late.
That being said, there was no love lost between Cheryl and progressives.
I do share some of the progressive ideas, and I might even call myself a progressive. But the folks I know who call themselves progressive are just, for want of a better word, really vehement progressives.
My second source was Doug Dorsey, who works in communications and was also a scoutmaster. Doug considers himself a moderate conservative.
I'm a registered Republican, but I'm not a right-wing conservative. I consider myself more moderate. Mm-hmm. I've done some of those online quizzes to try and feel what you're at, and every one I answer comes back with me being more moderate, which I think is a fair representation. I really wouldn't classify me either way. I mean, I think there are pluses and minuses to both aspects of how you look at things. You can't look at things in one way. You've got to look at things in a big picture. I think as a whole, society has changed a lot to, I don't know, just be blunt, weaken. I think we've weakened ourselves. I think as a whole we've shot ourselves in the foot. Mm-hmm. I grew up in an age where you had a problem, you figured out how to get through it, you worked yourself through it, you got through your problems, and you recovered, and as hard as you worked, that's how much you got back. Mm-hmm. I honestly wonder how many people think like that anymore.
Coming back to New Fairfield, I wanted to gauge people's responses to both local and national issues. I figured that by using a person's perception of things going on in their backyard, I could extrapolate their beliefs about national issues. Thankfully, my town has some ongoing debates that are ripe for this sort of comparison. Over the last year, the New Fairfield Board of Education has come under heavy assault by enraged parents and townsfolk. They accuse their superintendent and the Board of Ed of being complacent and indifferent to the local school system. This anger and vitriol reached a fever pitch at the beginning of last year, when televised Board of Ed meetings were dominated by the public comment segment, in which parents, teachers, and other members of the community lashed out at the board for everything from social media disputes to the efficacy of the special ed program. The controversy has persisted into the present, as the superintendent has resisted several calls to step down. I wondered how the dispute over the Board of Ed was affected by our nation's overall political climate. Was this sudden outburst of anger part of the anger we see across America today? Cheryl seemed open to the idea.
I think it hasn't helped, but it would be unfair to say that what's happened at our Board of Education, for example, is the result of Donald Trump. Our politics at both the local, state, and national level has gotten coarser and coarser and coarser. Mm-hmm. It has been just an evolving trend. But the more it happens on one level or another, the more it says to people, it's okay. This is the way that politics gets done.
Right.
And I think that's a big problem.
Doug wasn't so sure.
Yeah, I guess it's impossible, but I can't give you a definitive opinion on that. Again, I'm not involved. I guess when you look at it, the divisions that exist between the pro and the yeah, there is some. You can probably do some comparison there, but to say it's a one-for-one relationship, no, I can't comment on that.
When I turn the conversation back to the national stage, Cheryl and Doug really diverged in their opinion.
I think there's way too much of this stupidity going on both sides. Both sides are to blame. Again, I think Mr. Trump's got some excellent ideas, but he's got to be better able to bring them out, because some of the things he says and some of the things he does take away from some of the good things you can see that he wants to do. The Republicans really screwed up.
Right.
They had this election was theirs to lose. Okay, there was no way, in my opinion, that they were going to lose as long as they played their cards. Mm-hmm. They came very close to blowing that pat hand. But the Democrats also have to realize, okay, he won. Let's figure out how to do it. And then while they're working toward their strategies for 4 years or 8 years or however many years it's going to be to get back in control when it's their time again. Mm-hmm. Okay, in the meantime, figure out how we can get there, because this partisan stuff is really annoying. I mean, I get tired of watching the news.
When I asked him about the liberal response to Trump's administration, Doug had this to say.
Yeah, they had a right to march. Do I think that they had to make such are they looking at it from the right perspective? Oh, I don't know. You could argue lots of different things. Mm-hmm. I question what rights have been challenged. What rights have been taken away? None. The stuff that's going on is stuff that happens every time there's a political change. The same conversations happen. It's just because of the nature of this last election, everything's blown up even bigger.
He seemed overall optimistic about the state of affairs in America.
My job as a, late-age baby boomer, to someone like you is how do I help you prepare to take the world to the next level? So when I'm in my 70s and I'm sitting around on my rocking chair relaxing because I'm retired, that I have confidence in guys like you that you're doing the right thing. I hope we can get through it. I just encourage people today to not get suckered into all the negativity.
Yeah.
Make your own choices. Look at your own. Don't listen to everybody. Listen to both sides.
Cheryl painted a much darker picture of our nation. You think there's a way out? You think that there's any way that we can come together as a country again?
Oh man. I don't know. I want there to be. I want there to be a way out. I don't know.
She was afraid for what a Trump presidency might mean.
I'd love to compromise with somebody. I'm just not sure how through the vehicle of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Cheryl was especially astonished with the number of her friends that were Trump supporters.
I talk to people that are educated and reasonable. People I've known for a long time. People who have been friends who voted for Donald Trump. And I really it's much easier if you can just kind of make the Trump voter a caricature. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're a racist, they're uneducated, oh, they're in the Midwest, da-da-da. I know that not to be the case.
Overall, she was uncertain about the future.
By the time 4 years of that is done, it's going to be hard to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, which I know is the goal. I'm not sure I will see in my lifetime our country get back to the kind of environmental standards we have today, for example. And by the time that a Trump administration is over, whether it's 4 years or 8 years, it may be too late then. I think Donald Trump got elected at a very bad time for the world.
Doug, however, was confident that whatever Trump does can be undone.
There's always a way out. Okay, you can never sit back and say there's no way out, because if you are, then you're a defeatist. You're giving up. So my answer to that is, yeah, there's a way out. You just can never give up. People have to change their attitudes.
Both, in the end, agreed that no matter what happens, it would take a long time to remedy the potential damage Donald Trump could do to America. New Fairfield is nothing more than a spot on the map, a small town that one might assume has little influence or bearing on national issues. However, I found that my town is a place of vibrant political opinion that almost mirrors the sentiments being expressed on the national stage today. There is much uncertainty in New Fairfield, as there is in America. People like Cheryl are afraid that they're leaving millennials like me with an unsalvageable nation and can't understand how anyone could be content with a Trump administration. At the same time, there are Americans like Doug, who recognize the pitfalls of our current situation but aren't worried about my generation's ability to fill the gaps. There's frustration on both sides, admittedly, and neither can come to a consensus about exactly what needs to be done for the future. With this anger manifesting itself on all levels of society every day, it can be hard to be hopeful for the future. Cheryl expressed this sentiment.
I'm pretty pessimistic. Mm-hmm. And I hate to say that because you're young and you have your whole life ahead of you. I'm very sorry.
I wish I could leave off with a definitive answer as to whether or not there should be hope for our nation. But there seems to be no agreement as to whether or not there is. We live in an uncertain period in American history, and as far as hope is concerned, only time will tell.